All right. Special edition of the BCP Podcast. Let me welcome in first Matt with Flex Sports, Derek with Quick Cut. How's everybody doing today?
Doing good, doing good. How you doing, Preston?
Yeah, I felt like we missed some time. We had family stuff going on and all that good stuff, but a lot has happened since the last conversation. And I just want to jump right into it, hence the Texas hat. Okay. Get you guys fired up a little bit. College football playoffs announced the top four teams, and Florida State gets left out. Toss that out. All right. Matt's got the Florida State helmet in the back. Matt, what are your first impressions when you heard the announcement?
All right, so I've had this conversation a couple times, and I even had it with my wife that doesn't know a lot about football. So I think I can kind of break this down a little bit how I feel. So when you think about they only let four teams go in, and to be one of those four teams, you got to have a great program, obviously, but that program has to be great for a couple years, and I think that's where Florida State kind of falls in. We just, we had a really, really good year, but you have these other teams that have had some really good years, 3 or 4 or 5 good years. And so what, for me personally, when I look at college, I try not to really pay attention to the national championship. If my team can get into a bowl game or if they can win their conference, then, I really, that's where I'm kind of like, all right, we did what we had to do. We won the ACC. I feel like they were, they got the worst end of the stick for any team essentially because they did everything they could do. They won everything they could win, and they weren't in there. But when you look at all these other teams, like let's just talk about like a small team like Liberty or something like that. They won their championship and they're not going to be able to be in the national, playoffs. But they know that they're not ever going to be in that just because it's so favored to those top couple teams. And it's really hard unless you have, you saw like Colorado come out swinging and beating these bigger teams. But, a lot of teams don't have the opportunity to beat those bigger teams. So, like, what are the odds of Alabama just their last game gets to play Georgia? And all they had to do was win that one game, and they're automatically in there. And so if you don't have that type of schedule, you're just not going to get in there. And to get that type of schedule, you're going to have to win a couple years in a row to be even recognized as one of those type of teams. So I wasn't too upset about it. I would have liked to see Florida State in there to try to finish off the season, but I'm glad they won the ACC championship. I'm actually booking tickets this week to go down and watch them play in Miami against Georgia in their bowl game. So I'm not too mad about it. How do you feel about it, Derek?
Well, I mean, I'm not a Florida State fan, but I am an admitted homer when it comes to the state of Florida. If it's Florida State playing Florida and Florida has a chance to go to the title and Florida State doesn't, I'm pulling for the Gators. If Miami has a chance to go, I'm pulling for the Hurricanes over the other two. If Florida State, so I don't necessarily have a favorite team, but I thought Florida State got robbed of this, and here's the reason why. I mean, using Liberty as an example, I mean, we have the Power Fives, then we have the Group of Fives using that lingo. You cannot deny a Power Five conference an opportunity if they run the table. I mean, why else play the games? You got a Power Five conference that won undefeated, had a great year, has a great defense. I mean, are we just going to say, this is just a quarterback? It's like the damn Heisman Trophy. It's just only quarterbacks have an opportunity to win the Heisman. And now we're just like, well, only quarterbacks have a chance to win a national title now. And I think, yeah, sure, a great, quarterback for Florida State goes down. And who's to say that the next great Florida State quarterback isn't coming in right behind him? But let's set that aside. It's a team game. It's a Power 5 conference. There's 4 spots available for the playoff. And we're going to let an Alabama team in the door with 1 loss that, sure, they beat Georgia, but if we're going to say, oh, Florida State didn't look good against Florida, well, what the hell did Alabama look like against Auburn the same week they played? And then we're not even talking about Texas. I mean, the SEC, I get it. Definitely the most dominant conference since our lifetimes. I mean, as long as we've been alive, the SEC has dominated college football. That's going to change with this NIL situation going on. I'm going to tell you that right now. In Alabama's days, may sound crazy, But those days are in the rearview mirror. I think Nick Saban even knows that with the way he pushed back against this NIL situation, because you're going to have teams like USC and Texas and some of these other big-time programs that are going to become dominant. I mean, hell, who's to stop Phil Knight at Oregon just saying, you know what, I'm going to pay $100 million a year. I'm going to buy up the best talent out that exists there. So I think the whole college dynamics of the top teams and the top conferences are going to change. I think we saw that a little bit with Alabama this year, but I just don't know how you could take a Power 5 undefeated team that has an excellent defense, that has one of their top defensive players that's going to become eligible that had transferred from Miami. I just don't know how you keep those programs out. And you say, oh, yeah, Alabama, you look like hell against Auburn 2 weeks before, the same week that Florida State didn't look great against Florida, and you're going to get in. I just don't know. Why play the games? If you're going to go undefeated in the Power 5, why play the games? Why don't we just say, well, these are the best quarterbacks, so the playoffs are only available to the best quarterbacks, and then everybody else, if your quarterback's down or you don't have one, you have no chance. I just don't know if that's a good precedent to set. I just don't know if you can keep an undefeated. You can keep an undefeated Power 5 out of a two-person playoff maybe, but you cannot not have an undefeated Power 5 team miss out on a 4-team playoff. I mean, what are we doing with 4 teams anyway? Why don't we just go to 6 with the top 2 getting a bye, or go to 8? Every single year, you're going to have more than 2 most of the time and less than 6, 5 or 6. And you could probably make the case this year. You're never going to have 10 teams that have an argument. And rarely do you have a Texas USC situation where it's obvious, like, okay, those are the 2. But you always have more than 2, and you most of the time have less than 6. And it just turns out that this year there were 5, 6. But I don't know how you just got to say Texas or Alabama. Y'all have to fight for this last spot. How they figure that out, that's up to them. But I just think it was a wrong move. Bad precedent to set. Because, again, why play the damn games? Why play them?
It's discouraging to the teams. You know, you go that far to not be in there.
Yep.
So, Derek and Preston, you can answer this too, but if you could open up the playoffs, how many teams would you let? I think you said 6. Would that be your number of teams in the playoff? It's currently at 4, obviously, and seems like it's a little low.
You got, I mean, 8, 6 or 8. I don't know if you could do more than that, just because of the number of games really becomes, I mean, what are you going to have? Some teams play 9 games over the course of the season. Some play 13. So I think you couldn't have more than 3 rounds for the winners eventually. You just have too much of a difference in games played, unless they figured out a different format. But I don't know. Personally, I'm all for getting rid of the cupcake games that most of the teams play. And let's look, you know what, that brings up, Florida State played 2 SEC programs, LSU, Florida, and their in-state rival in Miami, and the ACC schedule. So I don't know. But anyway, go ahead, Preston. I'm all fired up now.
I love it. I love it. And that's why this makes it so fun, because everybody's going to be fired up about this argument. Let me ask the first thing, I'd keep it at 4, only because I like it being hard to get into. The other thing is that you start asking college players to play an NFL schedule once it gets past those games. You're talking about going into a 16-game college football season if you start looking at 8, 10 to 12 team playoffs. So it's going to be, it would be tough, but we're still, the money thing is a real thing. College football generates a lot of revenue. And I think that has to do with it. So now here goes my argument. Here goes my pushback for all of it is you did have Oregon lose. Okay. So now you bump everybody behind Oregon up a slot. Okay. That includes Alabama. That includes Texas. You bring Alabama in because they beat the number 1 team in the nation, who was number 1 for 3 years running. And Alabama looked at times, they looked like they were 2 touchdowns better than them every single time. Okay. They were almost in complete control of that whole game. Now you take that, you say, okay, well, does Texas get in only because Bama beat Georgia? Is Texas the default because they beat Bama first game of the season? I think so. I think that is part of it. You can't deny Washington. you can't deny Michigan, so now you got 2 slots. Georgia, either they stay in.
Why couldn't you deny Washington?
Well, Washington beat the most ranked teams. I believe Washington beat 4 of 5 ranked teams throughout their season, and they beat Oregon twice and won the conference. It's hard to argue against them. Well, that would be the first argument for, okay, they even if you don't respect the ranking of the teams they beat, the same committee still ranked those teams. So either you're going to go backtrack on what you did and say your rankings were trash, or you got to let them in because you did rank. You made those rankings. So they beat a number of ranked teams throughout the season. Now you go to, okay, well, now we got to rank the top 4 teams. Here goes the Florida State argument. Watching Florida State without their starting quarterback, they did not look good. Now, you're going to argue on principle. The principle side of the argument is, however, as a team, they did nothing to hurt their cause. That's the principle side of it, right? You should not put all that value on one kid. That's the principle side of it. And us 3 on this call, I think, would agree on that. So that's the principle side of the argument. The human side of the argument, looking at Florida State, they did not look like a top 4 team without their guy. And that's where you say against Florida, they had a chance with the backup quarterback, number 2 kid. He didn't look great in that game. And then you go to the SEC championship game, the ACC championship game against Louisville with their number 3 quarterback, and they look like trash. They can only produce 10.7 on offense against Louisville. So now you're saying, okay, well, they're going to get the backup back. They'll get the number 2 back for the playoffs, and they'll possibly look a little bit better. However, Florida is awful. Florida is not a very good football team. So now you're saying, well, we need to have the top 4 teams in the nation play each other. How do we justify Florida State being a top 4 team without their top player? And that's where you're like, it's not that hard for me to understand the ranking when they're not as strong as they would be without their best player. So now you go to the Alabama argument. Should Alabama bump all the way up to the top 4? Well, they just knocked down the number 1 team in the nation, and Texas beat them. And they said, well, Alabama looked like trash against USF. Well, they didn't have their starting quarterback against USF. Well, they looked okay against rival Auburn. Well, it's a rivalry game. We've done that like every year. They look like that every year against Auburn, no matter the records. And then you take Florida State, you take their schedule in the hand. You say, okay, well, how many quality wins does Florida State have on their schedule? Are we going to go LSU? Then who?
Well,
that's it.
Okay, but here's where I'd say, number 1, I think y'all might would agree. Why are we ranking teams preseason heading into the season? Can we just quit with the damn polls and not rank teams until midseason? Like, I know
they want
to make a ton of money and all that.
Yep.
But my God, every year we got to hear about this team and that team, and this is a top play. Man, disregard that. So I don't care about rankings. I just don't. But what I do know is if you hold Florida State to the standard of how did you look against Florida, that is their in-state rival. So granted, they may not have looked the way you want to see, but we're going to give Alabama the pass because that's their in-state, but they didn't look that great. But here's the other thing. Against Louisville, we could say that they didn't look that great on offense, but their defense is top level. So I just don't know how we take – it's just like, again, we're getting back to your quarterback, here's the top 4 quarterbacks, throw them in there. And by the way, I hope Washington wins the whole thing anyway. Even if Florida State was in it, I'd hope Washington wins just because of the local kid in Penix. So that being said, we just can't set a precedent that, well, these teams are ranked. These are the top quarterbacks. Again, all it is the NFL MVP award and the Heisman Award. It's like, all right, well, here's your top quarterbacks of the top teams. Here's your trophy. And it just, to me, I don't know, it cheapens it. And if we are going to hold Florida State to the standard of how did you look against Florida, we've got to do that with Alabama against Auburn. But the difference between those teams is one team lost and one team didn't. At the end of the day, I don't know. I don't know.
That's why this is such a great argument, because nobody really has the answer. All you can go on is justifying your stance, right? And trying to justify your stance. I can see where the committee goes in and says, hey, they don't look like a top 4 team. How are we going to let them in? How you keep Alabama out after they just beat the number 1 team in the nation for 3 years? That's a hard argument. And then, okay, and if you don't let Alabama in, that means Georgia doesn't get in either, and you have no SEC team representing the top 4. Now you got a whole nother argument. And right now we're talking about Florida State. Right now you're talking about Florida State and pissing off the ACC. And I get it. And Florida State fans should be pissed off. If I was a Florida State fan, like some, I'd be pissed off too. But you're not going to leave the SEC out. Now that's number one. If you start at the very top of the argument, you're not going to leave the SEC out. So how do you do that without having Alabama in there?
We
haven't talked about Texas, who beat the dog dust off of Oklahoma State and beat Texas game 1. The only loss was to their rival in Oklahoma, right?
So here's how you handle that. You figure out from the SEC in Texas, let them the committee, whatever, pick out of those 2 schools who gets that 4th spot. Call it a day. Guess what? Maybe the SEC. I'm telling you, this is we're kind of going off on a tangent a little bit because
no, we're not. We're
Here's the thing, though. I truly believe there are so many things going on right now with college football, in my opinion, in a bad way. This NIL thing, this portal thing, all of this right now is changing. Like, I don't even care to watch college football from a team this year. I watched Washington all year because of Penix. I didn't even, it's gotten to the point where half of freaking Alabama's commits or Florida's commits will walk out the door in the portal. And just like, if I'm a college coach right now recruiting kids that I know that have no true passion because I just watched my previous class, cut in half because of the portal, I just don't know where the passion lies anymore. I don't know if coaches can fall in love with their programs. I don't know how fans do it, quite honestly. I don't know how fans are like, yes, I love this team. I love this recruiting class. And then the next year, half of that class is playing for their rival. It's just crazy. And this portal and the NIL thing, to me, the SEC is no longer the conference. I totally get it. For our entire lifetime, the SEC has beaten everybody up and down. This NIL thing in the portal has changed that completely. I think the whole Alabama situation, I think those days are over. And I think you're going to start seeing some of these conferences. To me, it's a mess.
I dig it. I dig it. And Matt, give me a second. I'll let you run, bro. I'm sorry. Give me a second. Here's the other aspect that is behind the doors. It's just my personal opinion. There's always that money. The money, follow the money, right? You got to follow the money. Alabama, regardless, just my personal thought, I think what the committee wants is Texas versus Michigan, Texas versus Alabama. The viewership, the money grab on that is going to go through the roof. Texas versus anybody. That Texas versus Michigan, that Texas versus Alabama game will be a monster. Also, with these 4, you got star power in these 4. You got Tampa's Heisman and Michael Penix playing, and then you got 3 head coaches whose names are always in the media on a daily basis. Okay, so all that and those storylines. Remember, Alabama goes from being what the hell is going on with Alabama at the start of the season with the loss of Texas and looking like crap against USF to now Jordan Milroe becomes a playmaker. They knock off Georgia. They beat their rival in Auburn. That whole storyline is massive. If Michael Penix, is he going to play himself into a top 10 pick? Jim Harbaugh suspended. Now he's eligible for the college football playoffs. And then freaking Texas with Stark, they're freaking, are they the best offensive team in the playoffs? So you got all these storylines that fit up to, I just think, plays a part in the committee's decision. Now, that has almost nothing to do with the other part, which I argued before, which I think is an easy argument. But it is the storyline that plays into the money, which why these 4 teams is going to be massive for the money grab in the college football playoffs.
I get it, and I think it sucks because all we're doing is and I agree. The storylines, the big, Michigan, hell, we may as well throw USC in there and just say, you know what, this is the fan base markets, and let's go out and do it. Let's throw Notre Dame, USC, regardless. It's like, why play the game if the main reason a committee would say, yes, these are our teams is based on the money, based on the fan base, and based on storylines. It's like, oh, well, I guess the damn regular season didn't matter because here we have a team that won undefeated. But I get it. Now, I know that's why it's happened, but it's just frustrating that the priorities are, oh, yeah, there's a lot of money to be made here. Oh, yeah, Texas and I totally get it. But, overlooking an undefeated Power 5.
10% of this is TCU's fault because they got smacked on last year. So you guys can start blaming TCU for it. They don't want to make that mistake also again. Now, Matt, go. You've been sitting quietly and patiently.
Yep.
Me and Derek have been duking it out.
Here's the thing, and I don't have a negative side to it. I actually kind of lean more towards I kind of enjoy it. It's entertainment, but putting entertainment in college, can definitely rub some people the wrong way. But you are seeing the changes, just like Derek said. You're seeing players like Jaden Rashada was gonna go to Florida, but the bag wasn't there. Arizona State had it for him. He's now at Arizona State. So you're absolutely right, Derek. Things are going to start changing with this. I haven't built an opinion about it yet because it just started. The thing I don't really like is that transfer portal because I'm a loyal guy. So I'm going to ride with my team until the wheels fall off. But there's a lot of things maybe we're not seeing on the back end. Maybe the coaches are telling them, you saw Dion come right on in to the crew. Like, hey, go ahead and get into that portal because, I'm coming. And so we don't, maybe, not everybody has a Netflix show to show that to the world. So I saw Ohio State. They had a pretty big exodus on a lot of, they had their quarterback. They had a bunch of, and so for me, right when I saw one of our Tampa guys, he in the transfer portal, and I immediately was like, man, I hope that he can now get picked up by another big school. I think he will, but it's really changing the game. The kids are going to start looking at the bigger picture and the money because essentially the reason why they're trying to go to college is to get to NFL to get that money. And if you can stay level headed and get a little bit of money in college while you're trying to get it up there, it's hard for these kids to do that. But I think for all of us, we're seeing the game change before our eyes. And we'll just kind of have to see how it plays out these next couple of years because these kids aren't going to go to Alabama if they don't have the money right for them. They're going to go. And, Jaden Rashada was a starting quarterback in his freshman year going there as well. He had a pretty good season for himself. So, some of these kids are thinking like that too. I've been the starter my whole life. I want to go to college and start right away. So, that's a lot about the college playoffs. Let's jump into the high school playoffs. We were watching it all this weekend. It was some good games out there from teams playing in Tallahassee, all through Florida. We got to witness some big, big wins. Preston, break it down for us. So which game do you want to talk about first?
Congratulations to all the state champions and also congratulations to those who didn't bring home the trophy. It takes a lot to get there. I never went, wish I could have. And, the competition was really good. I think, again, the FHSAA is moving along the right path because this has been now 2 or 3 years in a row. And actually dating back, Matt, even dating back before then when they changed the system the first time, they're consistently getting really good games. Okay. Shout out to Valley Sports for picking up those games, and the production of that was high quality. Everybody was anticipating that, and they did a fantastic job with their production. We're going to jump right in with the state champs, and we had a number in the BCP coverage area. Let's start right here in the 813. Berkeley Prep, they get their first one. Coach Sayo gets his first one. Longtime Jesuit coach, longtime Berkeley Prep coach. Extremely happy for him. His dudes, they were the massive underdog coming in, and they never, ever looked like an underdog on that game. They looked like they were in complete control of that game from start to finish. They had 3 turnovers. I believe they were 3 turnovers before halftime, and they went into halftime up 14-7. Okay. With that, with Norland having 3 turnovers, Berkeley creating 3 turnovers, Berkeley should have been ahead by 3 or 4 touchdowns. You would think that, but they weren't. They kept scrapping and kept clawing. The coaching staff made an adjustment midway through the first quarter where they started incorporating a lot more of the Wildcat offense, putting Troop and putting Dallas Golden behind center and letting them create. They found out what would work, and they didn't try to outcoach themselves. They didn't try to be the smartest person in the room. They said, we're going to see if this works. We're going to give our best players, put it in their hands right away, and they made plays. Dallas Golden went for 160 yards. Troop went for 130 yards. Both of them had about 20-plus carries, and they came home with an 8-point victory, first-time state champions. Congratulations to the Bucks at Berkeley Prep. Matt, go. I'm out of breath. Go.
Oh, man. No, yeah. Congratulations, Berkeley Prep. You know, me being from Tampa, we don't really get too many teams that make it out of here all the way to the state championship. We had Jesuit a couple years ago. But so Berkeley Prep, I know we talked about them a couple years ago, and I talked about my buddy Cooper Hayes down there, QB. And, you know, they played him, like you said, really, really well. They would run the Wildcat, man. That really worked for them. Their running game, Berkeley Prep's running game was on fire. Dallas, that kid is unbelievable. And then, I mean, even when you look at the stats for Miami Norland, they just kept throwing and throwing, and they were doing well. I mean, they really tried to stay with them. And it just those turnovers, you know, like really costed, I think, Miami Norland the game, which Berkeley Prep came up on top, which ended up being one of the biggest upsets in history for FHSAA, you know, for Berkeley Prep to beat Miami Norland. And Miami Norland was a great team this year. We talked about them a couple times. So that was very, very impressive. And I get to kind of hold the crown with Berkeley Prep being from Tampa. And, you know, it makes me proud that one of our teams got to go do that and win. So
Venice and Lakeland bought an offensive show. Lakeland won again, back-to-back. This same game was played last year between the two teams. And Lakeland prevailed last year, and they prevailed again this year. But a high-scoring game, super entertaining for the 4S championship. Lakeland 60, Venice 48, and the best players made plays in this game. I guess that's where it comes down to. Damaris Rucker from Lakeland had 22 carries, 209 yards, had 3 rushing TDs. Jamaris Wilder from Venice, 15 carries, 112 yards, 2 rushing TDs. And the list goes on and on. Jaden Glasser completed 14 balls, 203 yards, and 3 TD passes. And if you want star power, you got in this game. And if you want excitement, you got in this game. Congratulations to Lakeland. They're a perennial national power, not just a local power or a state power. They're a national power. They yet again flex their muscle. Don't expect Venice to go quietly into the night. Venice will come back and surge back again next year. 2 of the best teams in the state of Florida went head-to-head. Lakeland prevailed, but congratulations to both of those programs.
Yeah, absolutely. Derek, if you want to talk about him a little bit.
Oh, no. I mean, I was just going to say, we had talked about this earlier in the broadcast, you know, looking at that bracket, it's like, man, you just sense that it's like something it was inevitable. It's like, all right, Lakeland and Venice are going to meet, and just slowly but surely that bracket played out, and that's what we saw. But yeah, go ahead, Matt. What you got?
Yeah, so I had to go watch the highlights of that game. I knew it would be a good game. I would have loved to have attended that one. So what I noticed, the big difference was the few turnovers that Venice had, and they had a fumble, which Lakeland was able to capitalize on it and get a touchdown. And then they also had an interception, which Lakeland also was able to capitalize and touchdown. So they kind of had like that 14-point lead for the most of the game. But you really couldn't count out Venice because they really did come pretty strong. And I just want to give a shout out to CJ Lewis, because really watching him play, I saw him. He had a punt return, and man, you guys got to go check that out, man. This kid is so, he is fast and can just get through, but the way he plays is just at a different level. He's going to be going to Colorado next year, so I'm excited to see what Dion has for him. And then there was another play he had that I just was like just mind blown, where about 4 guys all tried to tackle him. He just kind of stepped around and he got a touchdown. And so shout out to CJ Lewis. Shout out to the whole Venice team. They had a great program this year. It was exciting watching them play against Lakeland. Couple things that I saw at Lakeland that kind of stood out. Lakeland has a really, really great O-line. And, man, they just opened like the walls. I mean, there's an O-line on there. I don't know his name, but his number 78. I was looking at his highlights. And that kid will move 3 or 4 guys out of the way. and he'll knock one guy into 2 or 3 guys. I mean, the way those guys would just open these holes up for Lakeland, and Rucker was really just able to capitalize that and get those big runs like that. They really were able to hold tight. But as I was watching the highlights, it was such a great game. I get to the fourth quarter. It was only an 11-point game, and Venice got the ball. They kicked the onside kick, and they actually got the onside kick. So, unfortunately, the first pass was an interception. Right after that, Venice was able to get the ball and go and kind of capitalize from there and just win the game out. But, I mean, Venice definitely didn't go down not trying. I mean, they definitely worked their tail off, and they played hard. It's just a couple turnovers didn't go their way. And there was a couple of times the offense that wasn't able to score, and the defense, Lakeland's defense was able to step up and stop them. But other than that, it was a pretty even game, back and forth. So
what was the score?
The
score was
48.
Yeah, 48-60.
Lakeland.
So on your FanDuel over under of 105 points, was that 108 points?
Right.
Crazy.
Now, for the entertainment factor, it's awesome for us. We're not on the sideline. I'm not the DC on either team. So it was fun to watch, but I know the defensive coordinators are just not happy with the performance.
People say, a cornerback is one of the hardest positions, because it's really hard to mark these receivers. And when you see someone like CJ and the way they get open, these offenses are just so great that it's not a knock on their defenses, really. It's just very hard to defend both of those teams' offenses, And so it just took a couple, but that's where that whole saying defense wins games. That's what it took, was that the defense to step up, Lakeland's defense to step up and cause the fumble, get the interception, and stop Venice from driving, a couple of them. But it seemed like every other play they scored, both teams would just score. So it really took that, so.
And I'm a big believer in momentum, and sometimes it's this team has momentum over that team at certain parts of the game. Sometimes it's just offense on both sides of the ball gets momentum, and you see these crazy. We've seen it in the SEC in previous years where you've got, sure, definite top 10 defenses in the country, and all of a sudden, LSU squares off with Alabama and they put up 100 points out of nowhere. And sometimes momentum can be really interesting, and all of a sudden you'll have a freaking track meet breakout in the middle of a game that shouldn't be, and so it happens. So I don't know if that's what happened in this game, but 108 points. Wow. Yep, that's quick.
Let's stay in Sarasota. Congratulations, Cardinal Mooney. Matter of fact, Cardinal Mooney's head coach, Jared Clark, is a Notre Dame classmate of mine. We came in the same class, graduated the same time. Congratulations to him. Cardinal Mooney won their first championship since, I think it was like 50. There was like a 51 or 52 year spread since I could be lying, but they kept talking about it on the TV production, but it's been a long time since they won the last state title. And so congratulations. Shout out to Michael Valentino, who throughout the year split time. I think he was recovering from injury before the season started. He split time throughout the season with the other quarterback. This game, they kind of went to him and stuck with him throughout the remainder of the game. And he threw the not game-winning touchdown, but the go-ahead touchdown with less than 2 minutes left in the game for Cardinal Mooney. So congratulations to Cardinal Mooney for winning that state title. That was a great game also now. I think that the biggest thing I got was just the way the kids kept chopping away on each side of the ball. Okay. There was never a time that either team felt like they were not in it, and you can tell. Trinity Catholic played their behind off, okay? And Preston Wright, the quarterback from Trinity Catholic, he was 19 of 35 or 164 yards passing. Michael Valentino, like I said before, he was 5 of 11, but had some big ones. We gave him 174 yards passing and 2 TDs, and one of those was the go-ahead TD pass. So congratulations to all those teams participating. So, Matt, did you watch the game?
No, I didn't get to see that one yet. I'm going to definitely go watch this weekend.
Yeah, watch the rerun. You'll like it. Let's get ready to
It's not easy to get that far and win this stuff, so definitely
not at all. Let's get ready to get out of here. I want to do this though before we get ready to tap out. Derek, no, Matt, me and you will hit on this first, and I want Derek to lead us with one recruiting tip because we're going to jump into our next session. Is going to be a lot about recruiting. Matt, your biggest takeaway from the state championship game was?
My biggest takeaway from the focus on the game is focus on what you're doing good, and that's giving you momentum. If your team is running and you're seeing success, just stick to that and just keep running that ball, and versus trying to change up while you're getting that momentum. So I think that would be my takeaway from the championship games.
Okay, I'll shoot with. I still am going back on the Valley Sports production. I think they did a fantastic job, and I think they really highlighted the statewide teams in a big way. And it was much appreciated that we were able to showcase our talent on at least a statewide level, so everybody could see these games since they were up in Tallahassee. Florida A&M looked great on TV. The field looked great, and from what my whole understanding is that they were a very good host, and everybody liked the venue. So I'm much appreciative for Florida A&M opening up their facilities to us and the Valley Sports production to be able to showcase all these teams on a high level. Derek, hit us with a recruiting tip, all in 2 minutes.
Well, I mean, I don't know if it's a recruiting tip, but I'll throw a real quick question. I don't even know if we have an answer for it. But we talked about it in previous discussions. 5 out of the 8 winners of the state championships were private schools. 7 of the 18 participants were, including some of the privates actually beating some of the publics. We talked about, Cardinal Mooney just now winning, Berkeley Prep beating Orland, but Columbus beat Mandarin, St. Thomas beating Homestead. So I don't know. We had a previous discussion on private school versus public school. And I don't know if there's something to that and, some of the exodus out of the public school system into the privates. We got CCC locally, Berkeley Prep, what kind of year, the private schools in Pinellas and Hillsborough had. I don't know. It's just kind of a little side thought that I just happened to think of as we're talking about the state finals. But we'll jump into recruiting next. But go ahead.
Yeah. So I kind of like that. We'll double back and kind of discuss that, and hopefully it's not too late and it's still relevant for us. But that is a good topic, and maybe we can bring some fans in and have them talk on their opinions. So I'll mark that down as a follow-up, and then within that we'll hit our next episode with a lot of what should kids be doing now. We'll have that conversation. So for BCP Podcast, Preston Jackson, Matt, Derek, we're going to catch everybody on the flip side.
See you guys.